In an unprecedented and stunning geopolitical escalation, the government of Australia has formally declared a state of war with the Russian Federation. The announcement, delivered in a grave and resolute national address by the Australian Prime Minister, marked the first time a major Western aligned nation has taken such a step since the beginning of the full-scale conflict. This dramatic move transformed the war from a European regional crisis supported by international partner into a truly global conflict with a declared belligerent in the Asia-Pacific. The decision was not made in response to abstract principle of international law alone. It was triggered by a direct and tragic incident. A Russian-guided missile strike, part of the new offensive in the Sumy region, completely destroyed a clearly marked humanitarian convoy operated by the Australian charity Outback Aid. The attack resulted in the death of at least 15 people, among them a confirmed 7 Australian citizens who were working as doctors, nurses, and logistic coordinators. The Prime Minister's address to the Australian people was somber, leaving no doubt about the gravity of the moment. He stated that all diplomatic avenues had been exhausted, and that Russia's barbaric and criminal actions could no longer be met with mere sanctions and condemnation. He spoke of the Australian volunteers who had traveled to Ukraine to alleviate human suffering, describing them as the best of what the nation represents. Their deliberate targeting, he argued, was not just an attack on Ukraine, but a direct and murderous assault on Australia itself. There come a time when words are not enough, the Prime Minister stated, his voice heavy with emotions. There comes a time when sanctions do not suffice, and there comes a time when a nation, if it is to keep its soul, must stand up and say, this far and no further. Russia has chosen a path of lawless brutality. It has murdered our citizens. As of today, Australia will respond not as a partner, not as a supporter, but as a formal adversary. A state of war now exists between our nation and the Russian Federation. The Australian Declaration is not a plan to land an expeditionary army in Europe. Instead, it is a commitment to wage war against Russia using Australia's unique strength and geographic position. The immediate practical implications are sweeping. First, the Royal Australian Navy has been ordered to deploy its ships and submarines to the Indian and Pacific Oceans to interdict and seize any vessels flying a Russian flag or carrying strategic goods destined for Russia. This action aims to choke off Russia's vital maritime trade routes in the east, which have become increasingly important as European sanctions have tightened. Second, the Prime Minister announced the immediate seizure of all Russian state-owned assets in Australia, including banks' accounts, real estate, and other investments, which will be frozen and potentially repurposed to fund Ukrainian reconstruction. All Russian diplomatic and consular staff have been given 48 hours to leave the country. Third, and perhaps most significantly for the immediate battlefield, Australia will dramatically escalate its military support for Ukraine. The government has authorized the transfer of a significant portion of its own military hardware. This includes a large number of Bushmaster protected mobility vehicles, which have proven highly effective in Ukrainian service, as well as a squadron of retired F/A-18 Hornet fighter jets, which the Ukrainian Air Force could use after pilot training. A contingent of Australian military trainers will also be dispatched to hubs in Europe, such as the UK, to accelerate the training of Ukrainian soldiers, particularly in specialized skills like naval operations and long-range artillery targeting. Finally, the Australian Signals Directorate, the nation's cyber intelligence agency, has been authorized to conduct offensive cyber operations against Russian military, state, and economic targets. The war for Australia will be fought at sea, in the financial markets, with direct military aid, and in cyberspace. The reaction from the United States was one of shock and clear disapproval. The Trump administration was reportedly caught completely off guard by Canberra's decision. The White House issued a terse statement emphasizing that Australia is a key ally but had acted unilaterally. The statement stressed that this action risks a dangerous escalation and does not change the United States policy, which is focused on achieving a negotiated peace. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was more direct in a press conference. He stated, while we mourn the loss of Australian lives, a declaration of war is not the answer. This complicates the diplomatic situation immensely. I want to be perfectly clear. The United States will not be drawn into a direct conflict with Russia. Our commitments under the ANZUS Treaty are defensive in nature and do not apply to this situation. We urge our Australian friends to show restraint and reconsider this perilous course of action. Inside the U.S. government, the move has created deep divisions. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth is said to be furious, primarily because of the risk of unintended military encounters. His department is now scrambling to establish deconfliction channels with Australian forces operating in the Pacific to ensure their operations do not interfere with U.S. naval patrols or provoke a Russian response that could endanger American assets. Attorney General Pam Bondi has reportedly been asked to provide a legal opinion on the implications for intelligence sharing with a country that is now formally at war with a nuclear power. Other members of President Trump's cabinet, like Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick and United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, are primarily concerned with the economic fallout, worried that a naval conflict in the Pacific could cripple global supply chains and damage the world's economy. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is expected to brief the president that Australia's move played directly into Russia's hand by portraying the West as reckless and bent on war, a narrative that could undermine the very diplomatic track the administration is pushing for. In contrast, the United States Kingdom, still processing Admiral Radakin's urgent mission to Kyiv, offered a more understanding, albeit cautious, response. The British Foreign Secretary issued a statement expressing deep sympathy and solidarity with our Commonwealth partner in Australia. The statement noted that Australia is a sovereign nation that has suffered a grievous and direct attack on its citizens, and that its response, while a significant step, is understandable in the circumstance. The UK stopped short of endorsing the declaration of war, but signaled its continued commitment to leading a European effort to arm Ukraine, framing Australia's action and Britain's own effort as parallel, but separate response to Russian aggression. This nuanced position allowed London to maintain its role as Ukraine's most steadfast European backer without being pulled into a formal state of war alongside Australia. Russia's reaction was predictably volcanic. The Foreign Ministry in Moscow issued a statement calling the Australian declaration an act of impotent hysteria from a distant American satellite that has lost its mind. A senior Russian security official went further, threatening painful and unforgettable consequences for Australia. He warned that Australian shipping, citizens abroad, and national infrastructure were now considered legitimate military targets. Russian state television began broadcasting segments portraying Australia as a cartoonish and irrelevant nation that had foolishly picked a fight with a great power. But the underlying threats were taken very seriously by security analysts. For Ukraine, the news from Canberra was like a burst of sunlight in the darkest of night as their soldiers faced collapse in Pokrovsk and a new invasion in Sumy. The knowledge that a G20 nation had formally declared war on their aggressor was an unimaginable boost to national morale. The Ukrainian president immediately held a press conference calling Australia a nation of true courage and a brother in arms, he said. Today, we are no longer just partners. We are allies in the truest sense of the word, bound by the blood of our martyr and a shared commitment to justice. The Australian people have shown the world what moral clarity looks like. On the front lines, the news spread rapidly among the troops via messaging apps, providing a powerful psychological lift to soldiers who felt abandoned and overwhelmed just hours before. The Australian flag began appearing on social media profiles of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians alike. China, the dominant power in Australia's region, responded with deep concern. The Chinese Foreign Ministry called for calm and restraint from all parties, condemning the Australian declaration as a dangerous move that destabilized the Asia-Pacific region. Beijing's primary fear is that a hot conflict, even a limited naval one, between Australia and Russia and its maritime backyard could disrupt trade and invite a greater military presence from other powers, including the United States. China sees the move as an unwelcome complications that threaten the regional stability it seeks to control. In conclusion, Australia's declaration of war has irrevocably changed the nature of the conflict. It has globalized the war, creating a formal belligerent in the Pacific and opening new fronts in the maritime, economics, and cyber domains. The move has isolated the Trump administration, whose policy of seeking a diplomatic off-ramp is now directly contradicted by the actions of one of its closest traditional allies. It has created a new complex dynamic within the Western alliance, with the UK and Australia pursuing a path of aggressive confrontation with Russia, while the US calls for de-escalation. While Australia's military might cannot compare to that of Russia, its strategic location, its naval capabilities, and the immense moral and political weight of its decision have created a new reality. The world now watches to see how Russia will enact its threatened retribution and whether Australia's bold, desperate gamble will inspire other nations to follow suit or serve as a cautionary tale of a middle power caught in a great power conflict. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to So Kane Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.